started in 1991. The Lorraine Motel actually was in foreclosure, and which in the Lorraine Motel was a happening place. It was where folks came from all over to stay. But after Dr. King's assassination, it was no longer a place where folks wanted to stay. They wanted to come and pay tribute, so it went into financial ruin. And in 1991, because of the work of a dedicated group of folks here that were committed to making sure that this was not a lost place, to make it into the National Civil Rights Museum. And we have, for 30 years, really chronicled the civil rights movement, the American civil rights movement, and really help folks understand what this movement was about. And certainly more than the 2 or 3 people that folks actually associated with the civil rights movement, certainly Dr. King, and Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, and there are a few others, but there were thousands of people that committed their lives to civil rights. And so the museum is dedicated to telling their stories, telling about the episodes of the civil rights movement. We start with slavery, and it's intentional that we say that slavery was the first to impact civil rights here in this country. We probably have the most comprehensive story around slavery, so that people understand that economics was the basis of it. And that's why it lasted so long. Most people don't get that story. And then it's a linear experience, because we take you through history up until the assassination of Dr. King in 1968, and then beyond. We encourage people to be inspired by the story. We know it's an emotional visit. It's transformational. I'll put quotation marks around that, because that's what we hear so much. And a place that parents and educators feel it's critical that young people be a part of it. We do at the museum, we preserve the legacy of Dr. King. It's a power of place. It's a place where history happened, and it's still happening. And it is one of the sites of conscience, one of the international sites of conscience, one of the few museums in this country that are a part of that. So we're recognized for our facts, our truth in telling this story. It's interesting with what's going on now, with the fight against telling, the truth around what happened during the civil rights movement, what's happening with civil rights now, what's happening with history, with all these different theories that are not trying to be shared, to give a new generation an understanding of what happened in this nation. But that's truly what we stand for. We stand for making sure that folks understood who was critical to the movement and what happened, and who was impacted by it. It talks about successes, it talks about triumphs, it talks about tragedy, but it talks about hope and promise, and using this as a way of building a new future. That's what we're most proud of. And it's a museum of protest. Every exhibit is a protest. Every exhibit talks about people trying to make things better, and how they used civil disobedience as a way of getting that done. How they used nonviolence, in keeping with Dr. King, how they were sometimes not so nonviolent, if you were hanging with Malcolm X. So it gives all the different variances of what happened during the movement, and it sets the tone for what's happening now. What I am most proud of, and what kind of drives me every day, because this really isn't easy work. It's very emotional work. It's tiring work. It's draining work. One, because we're so tied to issues. Media calls us on a daily basis to give our perspective on what's happening in these communities, in the nation, in the world, because we've positioned ourselves as this more than a museum, as a public square, as the power of place. Because the unrest happened in 2020, with the death of, I'll say murder, of George Floyd, and how folks needed to respond to that. And they came to the museum. They came to the museum. Either they started their protest or ended their protests, their marches, their civil disobedience training at the museum. And it's because we have positioned ourselves as one that encourage difficult conversations, encourage understanding issues that are impacting our lives. When we take a look at what's going on in the nation and what folks are really needing to understand better, and we know that there's something going on when on a Friday night we have young people at the museum on a date night, that gives you some idea of what's happening. So this museum has grown into a place where people come to get some settling, either because they don't understand this movement, they haven't been involved enough in the storytelling around this movement, or they lived through the movement. It's generations. So that's what I am really encouraged about. That's what I am energized around. That's what keeps us coming up with more ways to engage, more ways to understand, hear the voices of those folks that were in the historic movement and those that are involved in this new movement, and connecting them so that they really see. This is the first time that I can tell you, and this is just me, that I have seen more links to the historic movement in the way that things have happened this time for this new movement. And it's young people, and it's very diverse, and it's from all persuasions, and that's what makes it so powerful, and that's what continues to come to the museum. They want to tell their stories, they want to show what they're fighting for, and they use the museum as a platform. I'd say that that's a successful place for us to be, that folks understand that that's what we stand for, that we really strive to be a catalyst to positive social change, and they believe it, and they support us, and they come. This is a very interesting place. It's kind of homogeneous. It has so many different things happening. It's a cultural ground. It's certainly, when I say cultural, I mean, there are so many things that are tied to these movements, that have happened here. There's so many historic individuals that were part of the movement that still live here. It's a place where music has thrived, and it's the birth of, rock and roll and blues and all of that, and folks that have really taken this music, to the world. It's primarily Black. It's a majority Black city, although it's not run majority Black. And so that's an opportunity to level the playing field in some instances there. It's a beautiful city. It's an easy city to live in and to grow in. And one that actually has aspirations to be more. And I think once you understand that there's more, that there is more that needs to happen, there's more that needs to be achieved, there's more people that need to be considered, then that's how cities grow. And so I'm proud that this is a city that understands that and is committed to making that happen. Well, I think one of the things that is important to us at the National Civil Rights Museum is that folks that have stories be heard, that folks that have lived through whether it's the historic movement or creating this movement that we're in the midst of now, that we understand how diversity and living different lives and having different looks and persuasions is critical. And that's what this museum is about. You know, we talk about all ways that civil rights have been impacted, not just racially, but along so many other lines. We encourage people to open their eyes and their minds to what's going on around them and be a catalyst for change. We're not asking people to be Dr. King. We're asking folks, though, to consider what's happening and see what role they want to play in making this a better world. We have young people that come all the time trying to say, what in the world happened? What is going on here? You know, we don't get it. That's not how we grew up, you know, and that's why they have no patience with trying to figure out why things went wrong and how they are going to make it better. We keep our doors open for open minds, and we encourage those minds that are closed to come to. And we find that there is a change. If you're not changed by the time you go through our museum, you need to go back through because you missed something. You missed something. It's impossible not to feel differently during the experience, either in understanding that this was something that you had no idea about because it's not in the history books. It's not in the school's books. Our scholars come to us because they feel that the civil rights movement is an excellent teaching tool. So our relationship with them and how they expose this in their classrooms is critical. So the door is open, regardless of what your persuasion is, regardless of what your thoughts and beliefs are. It's important to understand this movement so we understand better how it's impacting what's going on now.